In August 2009, a software engineer named Brian Acton walked out of Facebook's headquarters after being rejected for a job. Feeling defeated, he tweeted, "Facebook turned me down. It was a great opportunity. Looking forward to life's next adventure." Just 5 years later, Mark Zuckerberg wrote Brian Acton and his co-founder a check for $19 billion. That is more than the GDP of over 50 entire countries. It remains the largest acquisition of a venture-backed startup in human history. And the wildest part? They built a company with over 400 million users, zero marketing budget, no advertising, and just 55 employees. This is the unbelievable story of how WhatsApp conquered global communication, humiliated the tech establishment, and pulled off the biggest payday in Silicon Valley history. Today, over 2 billion people open WhatsApp every single day. It is the backbone of global communication. If you live in Europe, Latin America, India, or Africa, WhatsApp isn't just an app on your phone, it is the internet. But back in 2009, the world of mobile messaging was an absolute nightmare. If you wanted to send a text message across international borders, telecom companies charged you up to 50 cents per text. If you sent a photo, it was even worse. People were receiving phone bills for hundreds of dollars just for staying in touch with family overseas. Two former Yahoo engineers looked at this system and thought, "This is complete extortion." They decided to fix it. But their journey didn't start in a polished Silicon Valley incubator. It started in a line for food stamps. To understand WhatsApp, you have to understand Jan Koum. Jan was born in a small village near Kiev, Ukraine, in 1976. His home had no hot water, and his parents rarely talked on the phone because they feared government wiretaps. In 1992, at age 16, Jan and his mother fled political unrest and moved to Mountain View, California. They lived in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment paid for by government assistance. Jan's mother worked as a babysitter, and Jan swept floors at a local grocery store to help make ends meet. When his mother was diagnosed with cancer, they survived entirely on her disability pension. Jan was a self-taught hacker. By age 18, he had bought second-hand computer manuals and mastered networking. He enrolled at San Jose State University and got a job as a security tester. In 1997, he was hired by Yahoo, where he met Brian Acton. Brian was an American engineer raised in Florida, pragmatic, disciplined, and equally cynical about corporate culture. The two clicked instantly. They spent 9 years at Yahoo, watching the company slowly turn into an ad-cluttered circus. They hated ads. Jan remembered his childhood in Ukraine, where privacy was sacred because the state was always watching. To Jan, selling user data for ads felt deeply immoral. In 2007, both Jan and Brian burnt out and quit Yahoo. They took a gap year, traveled around South America, and tried to recharge. When they returned to Silicon Valley in 2009, they applied for jobs at the hottest tech company in town, Facebook. They were both rejected. In early 2009, Jan Koum bought his very first iPhone. He immediately saw the revolutionary potential of Apple's brand new App Store. But he didn't set out to build a messaging app. He wanted to build an app that showed statuses next to people's names in your phone book so your friends would know if your battery was dying, if you were at the gym, or if you were on a call. Jan named the app WhatsApp because it sounded like "What's up?" He incorporated WhatsApp Incorporated on his birthday, February 24, 2009. The early versions were a complete disaster. The app crashed constantly. Nobody downloaded it except a few of Jan's Russian friends. Discouraged, Jan went to Brian Acton and told him he was quitting to go look for a real job. Brian looked at him and said, "You'd be an idiot to quit now. Give it a few more months." Then, Apple made a tiny technical update in June 2009. They launched push notifications for iOS. This changed everything. Suddenly, whenever a user changed their status on WhatsApp, saying going for a run, the app sent a notification to all their contacts. Jan's friends realized they could use these statuses to send real-time messages to each other. A user would post a status saying "I'm in town," and a friend would update theirs to "come over to my house." Jan watched this happen in real time on his server logs. He realized he hadn't built a status app. He had accidentally built a superfast, free, cross-platform messaging service. At the time, sending a text between an iPhone and a BlackBerry was painful, and international messaging was absurdly expensive. WhatsApp bypassed the cellular networks entirely, sending data over internet connections for free. When WhatsApp 2.0 launched, user growth suddenly went parabolic. Hundreds of thousands of people downloaded the app in a matter of weeks without a single dollar spent on marketing. Jan and Brian maintained an absolute obsession with user experience. On Jan's desk, Brian pinned a handwritten note that read, "No ads. No games. No gimmicks." In a Silicon Valley obsessed with tracking user data, showing pop-up ads, and building addictive algorithms, WhatsApp stood completely alone. They collected no names, no email addresses, no gender, and no location data. All you needed was a phone number. They didn't even put a logo outside their office building. They didn't have a PR team. They didn't even buy a sign for their door. To pay for server costs, they occasionally made the app a paid download for 99 cents. Whenever they charged money, downloads dipped slightly, but revenue surged. Users were so hooked on free global texting that they were thrilled to pay $1 a year. By 2013, WhatsApp had amassed over 200 million active users. Yet, their engineering team consisted of just 50 people. Every single engineer was managing over 4 million active users, a ratio never before seen in tech history. Silicon Valley venture capitalists were drooling. Investors were knocking on their door, practically throwing bags of money at them. But Jan and Brian ignored almost all of them. When legendary VC firm Sequoia Capital finally convinced them to take investment, partner Jim Gates had to spend months chasing Jan down just to get him to agree to take $60 million to keep a cash reserve. Meanwhile, down the road in Menlo Park, Mark Zuckerberg was watching WhatsApp's growth charts and he was terrified. By early 2014, WhatsApp had reached 450 million active users. It was adding 1 million new users every single day. More importantly, WhatsApp's engagement rate was higher than Facebook's own app. SMS messaging traffic worldwide was plummeting, and telecom carriers were losing billions. WhatsApp was eating the entire global telecom infrastructure alive. Mark Zuckerberg realized that if Facebook didn't buy WhatsApp, another competitor like Google would. Or worse, WhatsApp would eventually replace Facebook altogether as the primary social platform for the entire planet. In February 2014, Zuckerberg invited Jan Koum to his home for dinner. Over chocolate-covered strawberries, Mark made his move. He offered to buy WhatsApp, guaranteeing Jan complete operational independence, a seat on Facebook's board, and absolute freedom from ads. Days of intense, secret negotiations followed. On Valentine's Day evening, Jan crashed Mark's dinner with his wife, walked into the room, and agreed to the deal terms. The final price tag? $19 billion. To put that number in perspective, Disney bought Marvel for $4 billion. They bought Star Wars for $4 billion. Facebook paid more than double both of those combined for an app with 55 employees and zero advertising revenue. The day they signed the final acquisition papers, Jan Koum didn't hold the signing ceremony in a fancy boardroom. Instead, Jan, Brian, and their investor drove to an abandoned white building a few blocks from WhatsApp's headquarters. That building was the former North County Social Services Welfare Office. It was the exact same building where Jan Koum used to stand in line in the freezing cold to collect government food stamps 20 years earlier. Jan walked up to the door, pulled out his pen, and signed the acquisition papers against the wall of the welfare office. He was officially a billionaire. This story sounds like the ultimate fairy tale ending. But this is business, and every deal has a catch. A few years after the deal closed, tension began to mount inside Facebook. Facebook executives wanted to monetize WhatsApp by targeting users with ads and tracking user metrics. Jan and Brian fought back bitterly to protect user privacy. But Facebook owned the company now. In 2017, Brian Acton walked away from Facebook, leaving behind $850 million in unvested stock options just to stick to his principles. A year later, Jan Koum resigned as well, forfeiting nearly $450 million in stock. Brian Acton later tweeted a famous 9-word message that sent shockwaves through the tech world: "It is time." #delete Facebook. The story of WhatsApp is one of the greatest paradoxes in modern business history. It proves that if you build something ridiculously useful, strip away the fluff, and focus relentlessly on solving a real human problem, you don't need marketing, vanity metrics, or hype to build an empire. Jan Koum and Brian Acton built a multi-billion-dollar product by doing the exact opposite of what every business textbook told them to do. If you found this story fascinating, smash the like button right now. And drop a comment down below. Would you have walked away from $1 billion to stand up for your principles, or would you have stayed? I read every single comment. Make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive business story. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.